My name is Caleb Morgan. I'm 30 years old. And 3 weeks ago, I found out my parents signed away our family business to my younger brother without even telling me. I'd spent a decade breaking my back for that company's 70-hour weeks. No vacations. Every sacrifice, and in one sentence over a cup of burnt coffee. My future was erased. My father smirked. My mother told me to be supportive. And Ryan slid into my chair like it had always been his. But what they didn't know was before I continue. Tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Because what happened to me wasn't just favoritism, it was a complete erasure of everything I'd worked for. And the way I chose to respond, well, that's where the story gets interesting. I didn't become bitter overnight. No one does. Bitterness is carved into you slowly, like grooves in old concrete, worn deeper with each step. And for me, it started long before that morning with the burnt coffee. I grew up in Spokane, Washington, in a modest two-story house with beige siding that always needed repainting. Winter mornings meant scraping ice off the inside of my bedroom window. The heater never worked right. But the living room was always warm because Dad sat closest to the vent, and Ryan sprawled on the couch with a blanket Mom tucked around him. I usually sat on the floor, near the draft, pretending I didn't notice the difference. I remember one dinner when I was 12, meatloaf night, which in our house was sacred. Mom brought the pan sizzling from the oven, the smell of ketchup glaze and onions filling the air. She sliced Ryan the first piece, extra thick, slid it onto his plate, then added another spoonful of mashed potatoes with gravy that shimmered under the light. She turned to me last, scraping the pan for crumbs. My plate looked empty next to his. I kept my eyes on the chipped edge of the table, chewing slow so no one would see the knot in my throat. I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. By high school, I was already the fixer. If the garage door broke, it was me on my knees, in the cold with a wrench. If Ryan dented Mom's car backing out of the driveway, I smoothed over Dad's rage with promises to fix the bumper myself. I thought it meant I was dependable. That one day they'd see me as the backbone of the family. What I didn't see was how my dependability gave them permission to lean on me harder. While Ryan skated free. One spring, during baseball season, Ryan forgot his gear before a game. He stood frozen in the driveway, eyes wide. Mom gasped like the world was ending. "Caleb, run back inside and grab it for him." I was already halfway up the stairs before she finished. I missed the start of my own part-time shift at the hardware store. No one thanked me. Afterward, Dad clapped Ryan on the back for pulling through and bought him a milkshake. I stood in the corner with grease on my palms, my stomach hollow. I didn't know it then, but this would matter later. At 18, I skipped my senior prom. Not because I didn't want to go, but because one of the company trucks broke down 2 towns over. Dad tossed me the keys to the tow vehicle with a grunt. "You're the only one I trust." So, while Ryan was slow dancing in the gym under neon lights and cheap crepe paper, I was lying on my back in the gravel shoulder of a dark highway, oil dripping down my sleeve. My phone buzzed in my pocket, friends asking where I was. A girl I liked wondering if I'd show. I let it buzz. By the time I finished, my clothes stank of gasoline. Dad muttered, "Good work," like I was just another mechanic on the payroll. I swallowed it again. When college came, I didn't go. I'd been accepted into Washington State with a partial scholarship for business management. The acceptance letter sat on the kitchen counter for weeks, curling at the edges. One morning, Mom cornered me, her voice soft, but her eyes sharp. "Your father needs you here. School will always be there, but the business might not survive without you." I told myself it was noble, that I was sacrificing for the family. Ryan, meanwhile, took community college classes part-time, drifting between majors, never finishing. He still had his room at home. Mom still packed his lunches. One Christmas, the difference was almost too much to swallow. Snow piled high against the porch, and the house glowed with colored lights. Dad had actually helped Ryan hang. We opened gifts by the fire, the smell of pine needles thick in the room. Ryan tore open a box with brand new skis inside, gleaming under the lights. My box held a heavy winter coat, practical, necessary. Nothing wrong with it. But I saw the way Mom's eyes shone watching Ryan twirl those skis, and the way Dad slapped his shoulder like he was already an Olympic contender. They barely looked at me. I told myself it didn't matter. That coat would keep me warm on freezing nights at the warehouse. But later, when I was alone, I stared at the stitches in the lining and felt the hollow ache again. I didn't know it then, but every skipped dance, every missed milestone, every gift that screamed function instead of value, they were chiseling me into someone else. Someone harder. By 22, I was living out of a duffel bag in the break room, more nights than not. The smell of burnt coffee and diesel clung to me. I told myself it was temporary, that this grind would pay off when Dad finally made me partner. Mom called me her rock. Ryan called me boring. I kept working. Then came the night of Ryan's accident. He took one of the company vans without permission, drove it into a ditch after a night out. The front end crumpled like paper. He staggered home drunk, gravel still on his jacket. Dad was ready to explode. Mom looked like she'd cry. Ryan begged me to cover for him, against my better judgment. I did. I told Dad I'd taken the van, that I'd misjudged a turn. He stared at me for a long time, then sighed. I'm disappointed in you. I swallowed the shame whole. Ryan patted my shoulder, whispered, "Thanks, bro," and went back upstairs to bed. That night, I sat alone in the dark kitchen, staring at the quiet hum of the refrigerator, realizing my brother's mistakes would never stick to him as long as I was there to absorb the blame. And still, I kept going. By 24, I had started keeping my own small savings account. It wasn't much, 200 here, 50 there, whatever scraps I could hide after groceries and gas. I dreamed of one day putting a down payment on a small house, somewhere quiet where I wouldn't wake to the groan of trucks outside. But one morning I logged in and the balance was lower. A lot lower. I asked Mom, and she smiled like it was nothing. We borrowed a little to cover payroll. Family first. Caleb, you understand. My chest tightened. I asked if Ryan knew. She tilted her head, her earrings swinging. He needed tuition money for summer classes. You want your brother to have a chance, don't you? I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed it, like always. But it carved another line into me. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if I'd left then, if I'd drawn the line and walked away. But back then, the idea of leaving felt like betrayal. My whole life was about staying, fixing, proving. 1/4 of July. The warehouse caught fire. A wiring issue in the loading dock sparked, and smoke poured into the night. I was the first one there, hose in hand, coughing in the heat. My arms shook from adrenaline. Ryan arrived 40 minutes later in flip-flops, holding a soda, asking what happened. Dad clapped him on the back just for showing up. "Good man," he said. I stood there with my shirt singed and my lungs burning. Invisible again. I didn't know it at the time. But these small humiliations built up like kindling, waiting for a match. At 26, my best friend Mark graduated college. I should have been there. We'd promised since middle school that I'd be in the front row. But that morning, one of the trucks broke down on I-90 with a shipment that couldn't wait. Dad tossed me the keys to the repair van like it was non-negotiable. Business before pleasure. I missed the entire ceremony. Mark sent me a photo afterward. Cap tossed in the air, his parents hugging him. I sat in the cab of the truck, sweat soaking my back, hands black with grease. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Good work today. Ryan says he'll be late for dinner, cover for him." I laughed bitterly. It sounded more like a command than thanks. I swallowed it again. But each swallow was harder now. Holidays became their own theater of favoritism. One Thanksgiving, the table groaned under turkey and casseroles. Ryan sat at the head, carving the bird like he was heir apparent. Mom bragged to the aunts about his big plans at school. I passed the gravy and kept my mouth shut. Later, when everyone left, I stayed behind to scrape plates and scrub pans. Dad walked past, already half asleep, mumbling, "Good man." He never said those words in front of anyone else. One Christmas, the snow fell heavy, muffling the town. Ryan unwrapped a new leather jacket, sleek and stylish. I opened a box with a set of work gloves, good ones. Durable. Dad chuckled. "Now you won't ruin mine." The room laughed. I forced a smile, but inside something snapped. I wasn't the son. I was the tool. I didn't know it then, but those gloves would become a symbol of how they saw me, and of what I refused to be anymore. By 28, I was burned out. I'd spent a decade giving more than I had. My body ached constantly. Shoulders tight, back stiff. My reflection looked older than my years' dark circles. Calloused hands, lines around my mouth from clenching my jaw. Sam Carter, our best sales rep, noticed. She found me one night in the break room, slumped over invoices, the smell of burnt coffee filling the air. "You keep this up, you'll be dead by 30, she said softly. I half smiled. "Maybe then they'll notice me." Sam shook her head, pity in her eyes. "They already notice. They just don't care." Her words stuck, like a thorn you can't pull out. A few weeks later, Miguel from shipping pulled me aside. "Boss, Caleb, you're the only reason this place runs. Everyone knows it, but they'll never say it out loud." That was the night I realized my loyalty wasn't a badge. It was a chain. Still, I didn't walk away. I kept telling myself that one day, Dad would hand me the keys, that all the silent sacrifices would finally weigh enough. I didn't know they were already sharpening the knife behind my back. The last flashback burned into me happened the winter before it all blew up. Snow piled against the warehouse doors, trucks idling in the lot. Payroll was late again. I'd fronted the money from my own savings quietly, without telling anyone. I told myself I was protecting the employees, protecting the legacy. The next week, Mom baked Ryan a cake for passing a single business class. Dad gave him the company credit card to get some real-world experience. Not a word was said about the money I drained to keep everyone afloat. I swallowed it one more time, but I didn't know it then. That was the last swallow left in me. Because 3 months later, in that break room with burnt coffee and my father's smirk, I realized the truth. They hadn't been waiting to reward me. They'd been waiting to discard me. And that's when everything began to change. The morning after Dad's announcement, I walked into the office like a ghost. My chair was already occupied. Ryan leaned back, boots propped on the desk, sipping from a can of soda. He grinned without even looking up. "Management's looking a little different these days." Huh. The air felt thin. My voice came out flat. "Move." He didn't. He spun once in the chair and laughed. "Lighten up. Dad says I should start learning the ropes." Thought I'd start here. Mom appeared in the doorway, cheerful, as always. "Caleb, be supportive. This is a big responsibility for your brother." I stared at them both, my hands curled into fists. In that moment, I saw the setup clearly. They wanted me to keep doing all the work while Ryan played king. That night, I stopped staying late. When a shipment broke down at 9:00 p.m., I let it sit until morning. When Ryan forgot to order parts, I didn't scramble to cover for him. 2 weeks later, the first crack appeared. Marcus, our supplier, called me privately. He was frustrated with Ryan's sloppy negotiations. "I've dealt with you for years, Caleb, but this kid doesn't return calls. He tried to rewrite our deal overnight." Days later, Marcus pulled the plug. We lost the account. Dad stormed into my apartment the next evening. His voice was tight. You need to fix this. Call Marcus. Get him back. I leaned back on my couch. Calm. Let the new boss handle it. Silence. I could hear his breathing through the line. Then a hiss. We can't afford this. You should have thought of that before you made your decision. I said, and hung up. That was the first time I heard my father's pride crack. But instead of admitting fault, he turned the blade on me. Rumors started in the office, little whispers that I was checked out, that I was bitter. I recognized Mom's phrasing in every line. She was feeding guilt like sugar cubes, hoping I'd bite. Family comes first. Caleb. Her text buzzed. Don't make this harder. I ignored them. Then came the layoffs. One Monday. Half the floor, staff showed up to find their badges disabled. No warning. No severance. Carla, our best sales rep, called me, her voice shaking with fury. 15 years I've given this place. And Ryan tells us it's necessary. Necessary. My ass. I drove to the building that morning. Walked past the empty desks. The silence echoing where phones once rang. My old office door was shut. Inside, I heard voices, my parents. Ryan. I didn't knock. I walked in. Mom sat stiffly. Dad paced. Ryan looked like a cornered animal behind my desk. They froze when they saw me. Good. Dad said. You're here. Explain to Carla this was necessary. I felt heat rise in my chest. Necessary. You fired people like trash. 15 years of loyalty. Tossed in the cold, Mom clasped her hands. It wasn't easy. Caleb. Payroll was killing us. You could have sold assets. Scaled production. Negotiated. I let my voice go ice cold. Instead, you gutted the people who built this company. Dad's face hardened. I don't need a lecture from someone who walked out when things got hard. I stepped closer. My voice low. I walked out because you lied. Because you gave everything I built to him. Don't you dare call this my fault. For a long moment, silence stretched like a wire ready to snap. Then Mom said something that made my stomach drop. We used your savings. My pulse spiked. What? Her voice trembled. The business account was dry. We had to move some money. Your personal savings were just sitting. My hand slammed the desk. The sound sharp as a gunshot. You stole from me. Ryan looked down at his shoes. Mom flinched. Dad didn't blink. If the company survives, you'll get it back. He muttered. You should be willing to make sacrifices for family. My vision tunneled. 10 years of sacrifice. Erased. My future. Stolen. And now my father stood there telling me it wasn't enough. That was the first real fracture. Not disappointment. Not bitterness, rage. Quiet. Focused rage. I walked out without another word. Carla was waiting near the front desk. She took one look at my face and didn't ask anything. She just nodded, as if she knew a storm was coming. That night I sat in my apartment. Every muscle trembling. Every thought sharp. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had stolen from me. And that was a line they couldn't uncross. The next morning, I opened my mailbox and found an envelope from the company's legal department. Inside, a lawsuit. They were accusing me of breach of fiduciary duty, claiming that by refusing to support Ryan, I had sabotaged the business. The words blurred on the page as a bitter laugh escaped my throat. They had stolen my savings, gutted loyal employees, and now they wanted to drag me into court for not saving them from themselves. I sat there at my kitchen table with the letter in my hand and smiled a real smile for the first time in weeks. If they wanted war, I was ready. From that day forward, I stopped answering calls. Mom's pleading texts sat unread. Dad's furious voicemails got deleted after the first 5 seconds. Even Ryan's hesitant, "Please just talk to me," never got a reply. But silence didn't mean surrender. I started collecting every scrap of evidence. I had emails, invoice, directives signed by Dad, messages from suppliers. I backed everything onto an encrypted drive. Not just protection, but leverage. Meanwhile, whispers spread through town. Clients complained about late shipments. Suppliers told me Ryan had tried rewriting contracts with zero leverage. And employees, those still left, sent me messages late at night. This place is falling apart without you. Why are they blaming us when we're the ones working? Each message carved deeper into me. I hadn't just lost my family. They were burning down everything I had built. And innocent people were getting caught in the fire. 2 weeks later, Ryan showed up at my gym. Sweat dripping. Hair a mess. He looked like a man drowning. "You've got to come back," he gasped, barely catching his breath. I set down my weights and stared. "Funny. You never stepped in here before." "What's wrong?" "Everything. Dad's yelling nonstop. Mom's threatening to sell the house. The numbers are bad. I can't do this." He ran a hand through his hair. "They said I'd figure it out. But I don't even know where to start." For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered his smug grin in my chair. His laugh when Mom told me to support him. "This is what you wanted," I said flatly. "No," he whispered, eyes darting. "This is what they wanted. I never asked for this." That was the first honest thing I'd heard from him. I let the silence sit heavy between us before I answered. "I can't fix this for you," I said. "But maybe, just maybe, I'll help. On my terms." He looked stunned. "What does that mean?" "You'll find out," I said, and walked out, leaving him in the parking lot. That night, I opened a fresh notebook, page after page. I listed everything I knew: supplier contacts, client tolerances, employee loyalties, hidden debts, assets they couldn't afford to lose. And as I wrote, I realized something. I had all the cards. The company might be in Ryan's name, but the relationships, the trust, the backbone, it was all me. If I wanted to, I could rebuild something stronger on my own. Or I could let their empire collapse and claim the pieces after. For the first time in my life, I felt calm, focused, in control. A week later, the company made another desperate move. They sold off equipment to cover payroll. Trucks sat missing from the lot. Forklifts vanished. But it still wasn't enough. That Friday, Carla called me. Her voice shook. "They cut our hours again. No warning. People are crying. Caleb, we don't know how to pay rent." I closed my eyes, listening to her pain. She wasn't just a coworker. She was family, the kind I chose. "I'm sorry, Carla," I said softly. "Hold on a little longer. Things are going to change." That night, I met Sam and Marcus at the old diner off Main Street. The neon lights buzzed overhead. Coffee tasted burnt. The booth smelled like grease and old leather. But it was safe. Neutral ground. Marcus leaned forward, voice low. "If you start something new, Caleb, you know I'll back you. Suppliers are sick of Thomas. They trust you." "Not him." Sam nodded fiercely. "Half the staff would jump ship tomorrow if you gave them somewhere to land." I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the steam curl upward. "Not yet," I said. "But soon." And as the rain streaked down the diner windows, I knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about revenge. The morning it all came to a head, I woke to a dozen texts lighting up my phone. Most were from employees, some from clients, one from Sam. All caps: "You need to see this. It's over." I threw on my boots, didn't bother with breakfast, and drove straight to the office. The winter sky was the color of dirty steel, heavy clouds pressing low. My breath fogged in the cab of the truck as I gripped the steering wheel tighter than I realized. When I pulled into the lot, I froze. It was half empty. Trucks that should have been running sat silent. Tires wet with melting snow. Inside, the warehouse echoed with a strange stillness. No chatter. No forklifts beeping. No smell of coffee. Just silence. Thick and smothering. Carla met me near the front desk. Her face was pale. Eyes glassy with rage. They laid off half the floor staff. No warning. No severance. Just showed up this morning and their badges didn't work. My stomach dropped. What they said, it was the only way to save payroll. But Caleb, these are people who gave 20 years of their lives here. Her voice cracked. And now they're out on the street. I didn't walk, I stormed. Straight to my old office. The one Ryan had claimed as his throne. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. Inside sat my parents and Ryan. Dad pacing like a general. Mom stiff in her chair, wringing her hands. Ryan slouched behind the desk, looking like a kid caught cheating on an exam. All three froze when they saw me. Good. You're here. Dad barked, as if I'd been summoned. Maybe you can explain to everyone this was necessary. Necessary. My voice echoed in the cramped office. You locked people out of the only job they've known for decades. People who stayed late with me. Missed holidays with me. Who kept this place alive when you couldn't. Mom leaned forward. Her voice soft. Rehearsed. It wasn't an easy decision, Caleb. But the company can't survive another month at this burn rate. I stared at her. Cold. You had options. Sell assets. Negotiate with vendors. Scale back production. But instead, you threw people out like trash. Ryan tried to speak, rubbing his temples. It was Dad's call, not mine. Don't throw me under the bus. Dad snapped, rounding on him. Then he spun back toward me. We're doing everything we can to keep this afloat. You think you know better. You walked out. I took one step closer, my pulse hammering in my ears. I walked out because you lied. Because you gave everything I built to someone who didn't even want it. Don't you dare pretend this is my fault. For a beat, the room was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent light above us. Then Mom said something that knocked the breath from my chest. We used your savings. I blinked. What she swallowed. Eyes flicking to Dad. Last month. Payroll was short. We moved some money around. Your account was just sitting there, and you what? My voice cracked like a whip. Dad's chin jutted out. Unapologetic. You weren't using it. We were desperate. If the company survives, you'll get it back. But you should be willing to make sacrifices for family. I slammed my hand down on the desk so hard the mug rattled and spilled. You stole from me. Mom flinched. Ryan looked at the floor. Shame written all over his face. Dad didn't blink. It was for the greater good. Don't be dramatic. You stole from me. I repeated, voice low, shaking with rage. 10 years of my life. Every dollar I scraped together while you called me the support guy. And you didn't even ask. For a moment, none of them spoke. I could feel the heat crawling up my neck. My vision narrowing. That was the line. The point I couldn't come back from. Without another word, I turned on my heel and walked out. I ignored Mom's frantic call after me. Ignored Dad shouting my name. Carla caught my eye as I passed through the lobby. She must have seen my face. Because she didn't say a word. Outside, the cold air hit me like a slap. My hands trembled as I pulled my keys from my pocket. But beneath the fury, beneath the betrayal, a strange calm settled in. Because in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just about them choosing Ryan. This wasn't about favoritism anymore. This was war. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I sat in my truck, breath fogging the windshield, and let a bitter smile spread across my face. They thought they had broken me. They thought I'd keep playing the role of the loyal son, cleaning up their messes. But they had just handed me the one thing they could never take back. A reason to burn it all down. That night, I sat at my kitchen table in the dim glow of a single lamp. The room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and cold takeout. My hands were steady now, calmer than they had been in months. On the table lay a yellow legal pad, a pen, and a folder thick with documents I'd kept over the years. Invoices with my handwriting, contracts signed because of my persistence, emails where Dad directed me to fix it. No questions asked. Bank slips from the time I used my own account to keep payroll alive. Every piece was proof that this company hadn't run on my father's authority or my brother's charm. It had run on me. I flipped open the folder and began sorting. Supplier contacts, client histories, maintenance records only I understood. With each page I laid down, I felt the rage in my chest cool into something sharper, something clean. It hit me then I didn't need their permission anymore. I didn't need to beg them to see my worth. I had all the leverage I needed. I thought of Marcus Reed, the supplier who had trusted me more than anyone else in the company. Of Carla, who texted me late at night when things went wrong because she knew I was the only one who cared enough to answer. Of Miguel and his crew, the backbone of our shipping line, who had followed me through snowstorms and midnight deadlines. They weren't loyal to the Morgan name. They were loyal to me. I leaned back in my chair, pen tapping against the pad. They thought they had destroyed me. But what they had really done was hand me the one weapon I'd never had before: freedom. Freedom to build something that wasn't theirs. Freedom to use every scar, every sleepless night, every betrayal as fuel. They wanted to sue me for damages. Fine. I'd show them what damage really looked like when clients walked, when suppliers cut ties, when employees switched allegiances overnight. I closed the folder, slid it into the drawer, and locked it. The faint click echoed like a promise. This wasn't the end. Not even close. It was the beginning of something bigger, something they would never see coming until it was too late. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, subscribe, because this story isn't over. What my parents and brother thought was the end of me was only the start of something much bigger. They believed they could steal my years, my savings, even my future, and walk away clean. But I've spent my entire life preparing for this moment without even knowing it. The next chapter isn't about survival. It's about power, leverage, and the kind of revenge that leaves scars. Stay tuned because you won't want to miss what comes next.